the heart of a city that never slows down, where every street corner hums with hurried footsteps and the constant rhythm of life, it's easy to feel invisible, lost in the noise, the motion, the memory of something that once was. This is where we meet Sophie. She's not extraordinary at first glance, just another face in the crowd, carrying the weight of unspoken thoughts. But behind her calm exterior is a mind that rarely finds rest, haunted by echoes of a love that once lifted her and later let her fall. Jason, his name lingers like a song that refuses to end, threading its way into her quiet moments and coloring the way she sees the world. This is not just a story about heartbreak. It's about the silent grip of memory, the journey of self-inquiry, and the quiet, powerful evolution that happens when we turn inward instead of running from our pain. When Sophie stumbles upon ancient wisdom tucked away in a forgotten library corner, something begins to shift. What follows is a story of transformation, where Zen teachings meet emotional healing, and where letting go becomes an act of radical love. This is a journey of reflection, revelation, and release. Of discovering that sometimes the people we can't stop thinking about aren't meant to return, but to awaken something within us. So take a breath, settle in, and walk with Sophie through the chaos of memory, the stillness of mindfulness, and the quiet beauty of letting go. In a bustling city filled with towering buildings and a frantic pace of life, Sophie often found herself lost in the clamor of her thoughts. The sounds of honking horns and chattering crowds created a chaotic soundtrack that echoed her internal noise. Days flowed into nights, but one relentless thought clung to her consciousness like a stubborn shadow. A person from her past who, despite the years and distance, would not relinquish their hold on her mind. It all began with a relationship that blossomed in her early 20s, bursting with passion but ultimately fading into bitterness. Jason had swept Sophie off her feet with his charm and charisma. Their laughter echoed in coffee shops, and their dreams intertwined like vines. But as swiftly as the romance had ignited, it imploded. Miscommunication, jealousy, and unhealed wounds led them to part ways. After the breakup, sorrow enveloped Sophie like a heavy fog. Despite the passage of time, Jason's memory flared unbidden at the most inconvenient moments. She would find herself daydreaming about their time together, replaying old conversations or wondering what might have been. Even in mundane tasks, he'd invade her thoughts, manifesting as reminders in songs or echoes of laughter in the streets. With his shadow hanging over her, Sophie felt trapped in a loop of unresolved emotions, and an ache of confusion remained lodged in her heart. One evening, while sifting through self-help books in the local library, Sophie stumbled upon a dusty volume on Zen Buddhism. Intrigued, she settled into an oversized chair and began to read. The teachings were ancient, yet felt relevant. They spoke of attachment, karma, self-inquiry, and the impermanent nature of thoughts and relationships. It dawned on her that her incessant thoughts about Jason weren't just random intrusions, but reflections of deeper issues yearning for her attention. In the following days, Sophie dedicated herself to understanding why Jason's memory clung to her, seeking not just clarity, but liberation. The first lesson she unearthed revolved around attachment disguised as love. According to the text, true love emanates peace, whereas attachment breeds turbulence. She reflected on her feelings. The many times she'd felt anxiety creep in as she recalled Jason's laughter or the jealousy that would blossom when she spotted him on social media. This isn't pure love, she whispered to herself, the realization sinking in. She had entwined her self-worth with his presence. Sophie understood that clinging to what was lost conducted her to a road paved with suffering. So much of her energy had gone into the memories and expectations cradled in her heart. The teachings emphasized that releasing these attachments requires recognizing their presence in the first place. She sat an intention to foster what Zen referred to as loving kindness, wishing him well without the need to possess or control. Each day she began a ritual of sending Jason positive thoughts instead of brooding over his absence. "May you find happiness, even if it's not with me," her heart whispered. This practice gradually dimmed the intensity of her obsession with the past, anchoring her in acceptance. The second revelation was the concept of unresolved karma. She learned that karma wasn't simply a punitive measure, but a means to bring closure to unfinished emotional business. The lingering presence of Jason in her mind pointed to an incomplete lesson, or unprocessed emotion. What was it, she wondered, that remained unresolved? Perhaps it was the hurt he had caused her, a pain she had shielded rather than confronted. Or maybe it was her own guilt for the way things had ultimately unraveled. As she contemplated these questions, Sophie began to write. She poured her heart into journal entries, detailing her pain, her lessons, and her dreams. She started to see Jason as a teacher rather than a tormentor, a crucial part of her journey that contributed to her personal growth. With each written reflection, she processed the unresolved emotions that had bound her mind. Over time, the intensity of her thoughts began to soften, allowing room for healing and newfound awareness. Next, the teachings introduced Sophie to a powerful concept, the projection of her shadow self. Inspired by Jungian psychology, Zen Buddhism suggested that the people who dominate our thoughts often reflect the parts of ourselves we deny. She thought deeply about Jason's qualities that haunted her: his charm, his charisma, his ability to draw people in. As she pondered, Sophie realized that these were also traits she admired in herself, but had repressed for fear of rejection. "Maybe I'm projecting my own unacknowledged confidence onto him," she muttered, as she examined her feelings with compassion. "It's not him I miss, but the parts of myself he embodied." Grasping this truth helped diminish Jason's grip on her consciousness. Sophie began to reclaim her shadow self, inviting all her hidden traits into the light. As she continued to explore the teachings, Sophie encountered the idea of attachment to outcome, a common source of suffering. She reflected on whether she was fixated on particular outcomes with Jason, like reconciliation or closure. Each time she thought of him, her mind would rehearse scenarios of various imagined futures, reconciling over coffee, confessing the depths of their feelings, or perhaps the success they'd find together. Every repetitive thought tightened the knot in her heart. However, the concept of beginner's mind offered a refreshing perspective. Instead of clenching onto her expectations, she began to breathe into the present moment, accepting the reality of her life without the need for specific outcomes. "What if I approach my memories of him without expectations?" she whispered one morning as she meditated. By adopting an open mindset, she began to dismantle the ruminative loop and invite peace into her heart. Embracing the teachings also compelled Sophie to recognize that she was not merely her thoughts. Zen philosophy emphasized that thoughts are like clouds moving across the sky, fleeting and ever-changing. But for too long, she had identified too heavily with her thoughts about Jason, allowing them to distort her sense of self and her reality. She started to practice mindfulness. Whenever a thought about Jason crept in, instead of resisting it, she acknowledged it. "There's that thought about missing him again," she would say, observing without judgment. This awareness created a spaciousness in her mind, where the once dominant thoughts began to lose their power over her consciousness. Sophie learned to detach from the thoughts, reframing her perception. With each passing moment, she could see her thoughts for what they truly were: attributes of fleeting experiences rather than reality. By recognizing this, she became the observer of her thoughts, not the prisoner. The practice of observing thoughts without attachment ushered Sophie toward understanding the illusion of permanence. The teachings relentlessly reiterated the nature of impermanence, how thoughts, feelings, and relationships are constantly in flux. Yet, in her heart, Sophie had clung to the belief that the intensity of her thoughts about Jason would last forever, trapping her in a cycle of longing and nostalgia. By revisiting this notion of impermanence during meditation, she learned to embrace the idea that nothing is fixed. Particularly, her thoughts about her past with Jason were also subject to change. Just like seasons change, so too do my thoughts and feelings, she acknowledged. This shift empowered her, like a gentle breeze sweeping through her mind, reassuring her that her current feelings would not endure indefinitely. The last revelation housed a deeper spiritual essence. Sophie discovered that certain people, like Jason, enter our lives as spiritual assignments. These relationships are not mere accidents. They may be designed to promote mutual growth. With this new understanding, she reframed her previous suffering. Rather than viewing Jason as an unfinished chapter, she began to see him as a catalyst for her spiritual evolution. What if this persistent thought invites me to awaken? She pondered, feeling a sense of liberation wash over her. Instead of seeking to expel him from her mind, she chose to ask, "What can I learn from this? And how can I grow through this experience?" As Sophie embraced this spiritual perspective, she noticed a transformation in her daily life. The weight of Jason's memory felt lighter, accompanied by a sense of gratitude for the lessons learned. She no longer viewed her thoughts as burdens, but as opportunities for introspection and understanding. With these insights blooming in her heart, Sophie developed a structured plan to cultivate deeper awareness and liberation from intrusive thoughts. She practiced mindful observation, gently bringing awareness to her thoughts without resistance. Whenever thoughts of Jason arose, she learned to observe them as a scientist would. "Ah, there's that memory," she noted, smiling softly. This simple act of acknowledgement shifted her experience, and she felt more in command of her mind. Sophie cultivated compassion as well, gently investigating the attachments and lessons tethered to her thoughts about Jason. "What am I holding on to?" she asked herself, approaching this inquiry with kindness rather than self-judgment. As she recognized attachments, she embraced the concept of letting go through acceptance. She understood that letting go isn't a forced action, it's an unfolding of awareness. By loosening her grip on the meaning she'd assigned to Jason's presence, she could hold on to the memories gently, like petals in her hand, beautiful yet ephemeral. Redirecting her thoughts with intention proved to be a practical exercise, and every time Jason's name surfaced in her mind, she'd use it as a bell of mindfulness. "What are the sensations in my body?" she'd ask, consciously attending to the present moment. During meditation sessions, Sophie discovered loving-kindness meditation, an avenue to transform her complex feelings toward Jason. By wishing him well through the "May you be free from suffering" meditation, she honored her growth and clung less tightly to her past pain. Each night, she'd conclude her day with this meditation, sending love not just to herself, but to him as well. This practice nurtured a profound sense of peace. By the time several months had passed, Sophie's relationship with her thoughts had shifted dramatically. Jason no longer invaded her mind like a tempest. Instead, he resembled a fleeting cloud, present yet non-threatening. She had cultivated an awareness that allowed her to embrace even the loveliest memories without letting them eclipse her present life. As she stood at the edge of her balcony one beautiful spring evening, Sophie inhaled the sweetness of blooming flowers. The city below buzzed with life, and as she gazed out over the vibrant horizon, she felt a wave of gratitude for every experience that had shaped her. The people who wove in and out of her life, including Jason, had all been teachers, granting her lessons about herself and love. In that moment, she realized that true liberation wasn't about erasing memories or banishing thoughts. Instead, it was about welcoming them as they came, seeing them for what they truly were, temporary, shifting, and ultimately insignificant in the grand scheme of her journey. Sophie smiled to herself, knowing that even the most persistent thoughts could transform into gateways for growth and self-discovery. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, she took solace in the knowledge that tomorrow would arrive with fresh possibilities, new relationships, renewed intentions, and the endless opportunity to learn and love without attachment. It was a beautiful realization, one that she would carry forward, like a gentle whisper guiding her through the tapestry of life. Embracing the past, yet unchained from it, she stood at the precipice of her future, ready to embrace the day with open arms and a heart filled with love for herself and the world around her.